right. Mayors are everywhere. I was in Nice, France, walking down the street. I look over and there's LaToya Cantrell from New Orleans. We're everywhere. All right. All right. Is everybody prepared? No? No? Okay. Well, here we go anyway. All right. Mayor Jane Castor, mayor of the greatest city in the world, Tampa, Florida. We can have a little bit of argument from my friends, but this is our weekend. We are beyond excited to host the 93rd annual meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. U.S. Conference of Mayors has provided leadership for America's cities for 90 years, discussing the important issues, the issues that concern cities, small and large, across our country, talking about civil rights, about transportation, about affordable housing, workforce, those things that each mayor struggles to address in their community day after day. Now, we're used to hosting big events. We like to refer to ourselves as Champa Bay, but this particular conference is sort of like the Super Bowl and the Stanley Cup all wrapped up in one. It is so exciting to be able to host my friends and my colleagues. Now, over the next 3 days, we will be discussing those topics that I mentioned earlier and many, many more. There is a lot of hard work that is going to go on at this particular conference. And we share ideas, we share approaches, things that have worked in our community and things that haven't worked. And so mayors are able to take those ideas back to their cities to be able to better serve their communities. And at the same time, if I could be just a little bit selfish, this is an opportunity for us to show off the Tampa Bay region, not just the city of Tampa, but for my fellow mayors over in St. Petersburg and Clearwater as well. We really do get the honor of living in paradise. And so to be able to share our community with all of my fellow mayors is the honor of a lifetime. So exciting to have everybody here. Can't wait for the next 3 days. And now it is my privilege to introduce the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and my good friend, the mayor of Columbus, Ohio, Andy Ginther.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much, Jane. I am Andy Ginther, proud mayor of Columbus and president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I want to wish everyone a happy Juneteenth. We're thrilled to be here in Tampa. As we get started today, I want to extend my thanks to Tampa's fantastic mayor and her team who have put together an incredible weekend for us, Jane. Thank you. We're excited to see more of this great American city as we celebrate the greatness of America's cities here in Tampa this weekend. And as always, thanks to my fellow mayors for being here. I look forward to this meeting each year. It's always a special opportunity for us to come together and really dig in on the issues impacting our cities and those we serve. Now for the most exciting, dynamic, and crazy part of the press conference, we're going to do a roll call of America's mayors. I'm going to ask Mayor Cognetti to start us off.
Mayor Tom Broderick, Anderson, Indiana.
Christina Murn, Findlay, Ohio.
Mayor Jerry Dyer, Fresno, California.
Brian Barnett, Rochester Hills, Michigan.
Elizabeth Couch, Burnsville, Minnesota.
Jane Castor, Tampa, Florida.
Aquanetta Warren, Fontana, California.
Tito Brown, Mayor of Youngstown, Ohio.
Mayor Tommy Hawaii. Jim Ross, Arlington, Texas.
Matt Turk, alcalde de Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Brett Smiley, Providence, Rhode Island. Daniel Rickman, Columbia, South Carolina, the home of the Fighting Gamecocks.
Mayor Bruce Spector, Clearwater, Florida.
John Mitchell, Mayor of New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Betty Resch, Mayor of Lake Worth Beach, Florida.
Mayor Woody Brown, Largo, Florida.
Tito Brown, Youngstown, Ohio.
David Holt, Oklahoma City.
Todd Gloria, San Diego, California.
Howard Weinberg, Aventura, Florida.
Tim Bussey, Bloomington, Minnesota.
Jim Hovland, Edina, Minnesota. Mark Friedman, Mesa, Arizona.
Dennis Clough, Westlake, Ohio.
Latoya Cantrell, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Mayor Joy Cooper from the city of Hallandale Beach, Florida. Good morning, Lyrian Gaylor Baird from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mayor Brian Waller, Piscataway, New Jersey.
Did everybody?
I think so.
Well, that was much more orderly than that. In times of progress and in times of trial, you can count on America's mayors, Republicans, Democrats, and independents to put politics aside as we come together to learn from one another, to collaborate on behalf of our people and our cities, to find solutions to the most challenging problems facing our country. Thanks to this approach, over the past year, we've made important progress on multiple issues important to America's cities. We've driven a national conversation about the nation's housing crisis. We made our cities safer with historic drops in violent crime. We've continued our progress in building a modern infrastructure for America today and tomorrow. The theme of this year's meeting is a celebration of cities. And at the heart of that sentiment is the fact that America's cities continue to be the engines of U.S. economic growth. In fact, a new report we're releasing this week on metro economies finds that cities account for 90.8% of the nation's GDP, 89.5% of personal income, 92.1% of wages and salaries, and 88.2% of employment. The bottom line, when America's cities succeed, America succeeds. My priority during my time as president has been our work to increase the availability of affordable housing across the country. Together, we've advocated for a host of reforms at the federal level to address this crisis. We also collaborated on innovative solutions at the local level, allocating funds and revising ordinances, land use policies, and zoning codes to make housing more affordable. I'm proud of our progress together, and we're encouraged by the conversations we have had with members of Congress, but we all know much work remains if we're going to ensure every American has safe, suitable housing for themselves and their families. Evidence of that remaining work is made clear in the results of a recent housing survey of mayors that Mayor Gloria will talk more about in just a moment. And once the federal budget process is behind us, we will forge ahead with our fight for housing legislation. I'm also proud of the work the conference has done this year, advocating for fair trade, urging the Trump administrations to prioritize economic policies that support consumers, families, and businesses. In March, the conference hosted an unprecedented trilateral summit in Washington, D.C., with local leaders from Canada and Mexico, where we voiced our growing concerns about the economic impact new tariffs will have on local communities, small business owners, and consumers in our cities. And we continue to collaborate with our colleagues as a delegation of U.S. mayors just went to Ottawa to participate in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference, and we're welcoming them here this week, the Mayor of Windsor, Ontario, Drew Dilkens, and the Mayor of the City of St. John, New Brunswick. What began as a response to heightened tariffs has grown into something much greater, a deepening partnership between cities and a model for international collaboration in a period of profound change. But because of the continuing situation in Los Angeles, and indeed the alarming developments we've seen in cities across our nation following recent enforcement actions, I want to recognize how mayors are doing their part to rise to this national challenge. And I want to start by commending my friend and the great leader of Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass, for her steady leadership in managing that situation. The federal government's decision to deploy the National Guard to Los Angeles without the consent and indeed over the objection of the governor is an unprecedented overstep. We must acknowledge the seriousness of the protests sparked by these federal actions. People have the fundamental right to peacefully assemble and voice their concerns. That is the cornerstone of American liberty. That's why this week, the U.S. Conference of Mayors will vote on a resolution that does several things. It delineates the appropriate roles of local and federal officials in protest response. It calls on ICE to focus its deportation actions on convicted, serious criminals, and not on undocumented, hardworking individuals who have families, pay taxes, and contribute to their local communities. And it urges federal officials to notify local authorities in advance of any planned ICE action and to conduct those actions in as orderly and unprovocative way possible. This resolution we will consider this week is not just a statement, it's a reaffirmation of the principles of local control, public safety, and human dignity that define our cities. It is a critical step towards ensuring the federal actions respect our communities, prioritize genuine threats, and uphold the fundamental rights of our residents. And lastly, as we meet in Florida this week, along the Gulf Coast, in the midst of another hurricane season, we remain concerned about the number of threats to the functions of the federal government that cities and states depend on to protect the well-being of their residents, particularly President Trump's recent announcement that he plans to phase out FEMA at the end of this season. When a Category 4 hurricane makes landfall, when tornadoes rip up our heartland, when wildfires engulf our towns, or when soaring temperatures strain our power grids, it is FEMA that brings the critical coordination, the federal resources, and the direct assistance that our residents desperately need to survive and rebuild. To weaken the partnership now is to imperil the lives and livelihoods of millions of Americans. That's why the U.S. Conference of Mayors this week will establish a new task force on intergovernmental emergency management. Led by Mayor Castor, this task force will work to elevate local voices in federal policy, strengthen federal-local coordination, and champion increased federal investment in pre-disaster mitigation efforts. As I finish up, let me say this. Some years as a country, when we gather for this annual meeting, the wind is at our backs. And others, it feels more like we're sailing into a gale. But despite the challenges, despite the political storms brewing in Washington, America's mayors remain focused on what truly matters, making progress for our cities and improving the lives of our residents. We're not defined by the turbulence around us, but by our unwavering commitment to our communities. So as we come together this week, mayors will once again put aside politics. We'll roll up our sleeves and work hard to find ways to collaborate across city lines, state lines, and even reach out to our federal partners. They're willing to meet us where the real work happens because the common good of our constituents demands it. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our Vice President, David Holt of Oklahoma City, who will be leading our conference forward from Sunday morning. Mayor Holt.
Thank you. Thank you, President Kemper. I get the chance to say a few things to the conference at Saturday's lunch, and so I'll largely reserve. We are so incredibly grateful for your leadership that was on display just for the last 5 minutes of all the things that you're focused on our behalf. And I think I speak for everybody up here when I say thank you so much. And you designed a great meeting for these next few days. I want to thank as well Second Vice President Todd Gloria, who I will bring to the podium here in a few minutes, and a hearty thank you to our host, Mayor Jane Castor. The hurricanes last fall delivered some massive challenges to Tampa, but your recovery has been swift and impressive. In fact, I attended the National League of Cities meeting in November that was held here mere weeks after the hurricanes. Though I know there was significant damage under Mayor Castor's leadership, Tampa did not break its stride. And this annual meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors presents a perfect opportunity to admire just how dynamic and beautiful this city is. Tampa is metaphorically wearing them apple-bottom jeans and boots with the fur. In the iconic words of tonight's performer that Mayor Castor has lined up for us. Thank you, Mayor Castor and the people of Tampa for your hospitality. Here in Tampa, we come together as America's mayors in what can feel like contradictory times. In many ways, our American cities are thriving. They have been for years. Everyone's story is crime and employment are down across America's cities, and we are thriving as America's chief economic and cultural engines. On the other hand, there is uncertainty. Federal financial support we have relied upon has become unpredictable. Processes and customs we have known are being rewritten, and respect for local control is sporadic. So I've certainly thought a lot about what it all means. But when you're in the eye of the hurricane, it's maybe not the best time for analysis. It takes time and distance for that. But I can say this with certainty. When the hurricane hits, figuratively or literally, we all look to one person to guide us, the mayor. Unique among American political leaders, mayors are the calm in the storm. So for the Tampa media gathered here, perhaps wondering what it is we are actually doing here, well, fundamentally, we are here to support each other and ensure that we each have the tools we need to be that steady leader in our city. Whether it is exchanging a best practice or important information or a word of encouragement or inspiration, we draw strength from each other. And uniquely, we do so in a bipartisan way. Each of us may make decisions or set priorities in our cities a little differently, but we are all equally committed to the idea that each of us has been elected by our constituents and that local control is always best. And so, even though in front of you are Republicans, Democrats, and independents, there is no daylight between America's mayors on the fundamental question of where decisions should be made and whose leadership should be relied upon in times of uncertainty or challenge. It is America's mayors. We are honored to be with you in Tampa, and I am honored to serve with these men and women who are America's finest leaders. And now it is my honor to bring to the podium a mayor of a city that may be the only city in America that could try to debate Mayor Castor on its beauty. And that is, of course, our friend from the city of San Diego. Please welcome Mayor Todd Gloria.
Thank you, Mayor Holt. He is a hard act to follow. If I only had thought to pack a Flow Rider reference, I'd feel better about my comments I'm about to give. But to Mayor Ginther and Mayor Holt, thank you for your comments. It's great to be here with my fellow mayors from all across the United States. Having to see my colleague from Riverside, California, Patricia Lock Dawson, has joined us. It's great to have some more of the Golden State here in Florida. I wanted to add my own thanks to Mayor Castor for being our incredibly gracious host and say very clearly that Tampa is thriving under her incredible leadership. I can't wait to check out more of Tampa over the next few days. I would just say as a San Diegan, though, can you turn down the humidity? This is, the Californians are melting. We'll get through it. I'm here to follow up a bit on what Mayor Ginther, President Ginther, mentioned just a moment ago during his comments. It's about an issue that impacts every city across our country, regardless of its size, demographics, or economy. I'm talking about America's housing affordability crisis. As Mayor Ginther noted, addressing this crisis has been a key tenet of his leadership of this great conference. And under his presidency, America's mayors have not just talked about the housing crisis, but we've demanded action to fix this most urgent of American problems. Together, America's mayors have been and will continue to be a powerful voice for federal action and reform. In our cities, mayors are not just not talking about this, but we're taking action on our own to reduce the cost of housing in our respective cities. We're forging partnerships, pooling our knowledge, implementing creative strategies, all to bring affordable housing more within reach of our community's families. And together, we are committed to a future where affordable housing is a reality, not just some far-off distant dream. But we need a strong federal partner to help us make progress on an issue and challenge this large. The findings of a just released survey of mayors on housing brings this problem into sharp relief, and it's a pleasure to be able to share this with you all. Supported by our partners at the Bipartisan Policy Center, along with the Capital One Insight Center, this survey represents 68 cities covering 30 states. The findings are such. More than half of the mayors believe that housing affordability crisis in their city will worsen in the year ahead, and 2/3 blame national economic conditions for that. 94% say that their residents are very dissatisfied or dissatisfied with the state of housing affordability in their city. And mayors believe that this situation will only get worse if Washington does not change course. Among the biggest concerns, the potential changes to federal housing policies as well as federal trade policy. Mayors have pinpointed access to federal funding as one of the most difficult challenges to address, along with the direct costs of housing development, specifically materials, labor, and land. Unfortunately, the lack of affordable housing in America is not a new challenge. Mayors have been sounding the alarm on this issue for years. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we have not been waiting around for any white knights to help us solve this problem. In our respective communities, we have been cutting red tape. We have dedicated local funds, and we've been innovating with every tool at our disposal to make housing more affordable for our residents. 90% of mayors in that study say that they have used multiple housing programs to meet the needs of their residents. And 2/3 point to the effectiveness of local land use policies that President Ginther mentioned just a moment ago. My message, our message to Washington today is to ask you to join us in this effort. If you want to solve America's housing crisis, then you must partner with America's mayors. Building more housing stabilizes families, and it helps us to address some of the biggest challenges facing the United States, specifically homelessness, job creation, reducing the cost of living, our climate crisis, and healthcare and education all are intimately intertwined with housing. And this is absolutely not the time for the federal government to pull back or to divest itself from its housing programs. Quite the contrary. In fact, this is the moment to double down, to lean in, and to make sure that we have more investments going to support every community across this great nation of ours. Our success and the well-being of our citizens depend on the shared responsibility and sustained interest of our federal partners. We need federal partners to stand up. We need Washington to do its part to help reduce the cost of housing. Because when cities succeed, America succeeds. And for our cities to succeed, we must build more housing, period. So, President Ginther, thank you for your extreme leadership on this and making sure that everyone knows this is such a key problem. And I appreciate your helping to tackle it. And it's an honor to be able to share some of those findings from that study with everyone today. Thank you.
You just feel the passion coming out of Mayor Gloria when he talks about housing. It's incredibly important issue, and just grateful for all that he's doing in promoting. I forgot to acknowledge the Dean of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Tom Cochran. I think he just shared with me that he has been alongside 56 presidents of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I won't put any pressure on you to tell you who your favorite was. You know? He's good. He's good. That's how you make it 56 years, right? He started, he told us when he was 5 years old, though. So we'd be happy to take any questions from the press.
Can I ask a question? Mayor Gloria, I know you just talked about the resolution about ICE. I know you had a raid a couple weeks ago in San Diego. Can you tell us more about your reaction to what happened there?
Well, what happened there was not good. That's putting it mildly, but for my colleagues and for folks who may not be familiar, 3 weeks ago tomorrow, we had a number of ICE agents show up at a local Italian restaurant in the neighborhood of South Park in the central core of our city. They arrived basically during dinner service on a busy Friday night. This was a time of maximum impact. What we know, or what was been explained to me, was they were looking for a handful of dishwashers, busboys, waiters, waitresses. None of them are known to have had any serious criminal offenses. In fact, it was explained to me at least 3 of them had absolutely nothing other than the immigration charge. You had a large incursion into the restaurant. They stayed over an hour. During that hour of time, word spread through the community that this was happening. Nearly 200 San Diegans showed up to express their opposition to this kind of enforcement. And what happened was a very tense exchange with residents of the community and the federal agents that were executing that immigration enforcement action. The result was the use of flashbangs, the presence of fatigued, sort of military-esque immigration enforcement, all for folks, 3 from Mexico, 1 from Colombia, that again, to my knowledge, have no criminal histories. What that did was really, I think, galvanize our community to support that business and to support immigrants within our community. San Diego sits on the U.S.-Mexican border. We're the largest border city in the United States. We're on the Pacific Rim. We're stronger because of our diversity. But that situation is not good, as I mentioned a moment ago, beyond the conflict it created, but because of the coordination or lack thereof, my officers were called to respond to that situation. The radio calls were for hundreds of people in the streets that were protesting and blocking traffic, the presence of armed people at a local restaurant. That kind of information, that lack of coordination, that lack of deconflicting puts everyone at risk, including the federal agents that were doing their jobs that day. So I had a long conversation with HSI to explain my concerns and to suggest that there's probably a better way to do this than to do it during a busy weekend dinner service at a popular restaurant where a lot of community members came out to express their displeasure. I will say, fast forward 2 weeks later, last weekend, we had 60,000 people protest in the No Kings March in my city. I'm pleased to tell you there was not one arrest. There was not an incident of vandalism. There was no violence at all. People peacefully expressing their displeasure with the policies of the administration couldn't make me prouder of my town that they can show up, behave responsibly, and make the point and then go home. All this is to say, and I appreciate my colleagues' indulgence, often when I watch media, particularly cable news, I hear representations of what border cities look like. As the biggest border city in the United States, I'm pleased to also be one of the safest cities in the United States. And so the opportunity to correct the record and explain very clearly that you can be a border city, that you can be a welcoming city, you can have a large immigrant population, and your city is not only going to be safe, but it's going to be thriving, and you're going to have a healthy group of folks who understand their constitutional rights and will exercise them when they want to in a legal fashion. Sorry if that's a bit long-winded, but it was obviously just the tip of the iceberg. Obviously, what we've seen subsequently in other cities across America is very disturbing. That's why the resolution is advancing at this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And we're really blessed. We have 2 colleagues who served as police chiefs in their communities before they became mayor. Think about that transition in the last 10 or 20 years. That just shows you what incredible leaders they are. The resolution I talked about that Second Vice President Holt just spoke to, would appreciate any perspective from Mayors Dyer of Fresno, California, and our host city, Mayor Castor, about why local law enforcement is the best way to handle these situations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jane and I have known each other a long time. We served together on the Major City Chiefs Association. So now to have the privilege of being able to serve with their U.S. Conference of Mayors is an added bonus. But just a little bit about Fresno, California. We are in the heart of the state of California, centrally located. We are the agricultural capital of the world. We produce more fruit and nuts and vegetables than just about anywhere else in the United States. And we rely heavily on immigrant workers in order to produce those crops. In fact, if not for our immigrants, whether documented or undocumented, people across this nation would not have food on their table. And that is a simple fact. As you heard the president say, I had the honor of serving in the Fresno Police Department for over 40 years. And the last 18 years as that city's police chief. And there are some things that I learned along the way that I think I should share. One of those is that in order for police officers to be effective within the cities in which they police and the neighborhoods in which they police, they must be seen as a welcomed presence. They cannot be seen as an occupying force. And unfortunately, what we are seeing today in many cities across America including LA, is an occupying force. And that is federal agents, now our U.S. military, and unfortunately, the Los Angeles Police Department is having to be brought into that situation. The other thing that I've learned is that in order for police to be effective, you must have the trust of your community. And if you don't have that trust, there won't be a free-flowing and sharing of information between the community and the officers that helps them to not only prevent crime, but to be able to solve crime when it occurs. And what I am seeing today in America, unfortunately, is an erosion of that trust of law enforcement. And it's largely because of what's happening, not the fact that we're having immigration enforcement, but how immigration enforcement is occurring in cities. And although I think there's a time and place for people to come in and wear tactical gear and riot type uniforms, that cannot be the day-to-day attire for law enforcement, whether it's local or federal. And so I do think that our friends over at HSI and ICE need to modify how they approach immigration enforcement in our cities. And the truth is, the tactics need to be changed, the uniforms need to be modified, and I really believe there needs to be better coordination with local law enforcement. And in terms of the National Guard or any other entity being brought in to bring peace to a jurisdiction, it would be my hope as a former police officer and currently as a mayor that we would have coordination, that there would be a permission from our jurisdictions for that to occur. Because at the end of the day, it's local law enforcement and it's the mayors that have to deal with what has occurred in that city. And so I just say that, and as I look around our country today and I see the civil unrest and the division and the protests and the riots and the looting and the violent crime as a result of how immigration enforcement's occurring, it's very sad. And I hope we can pause and take a breath in the United States and revisit how we're doing things today. Thank you.
And I can echo some of the comments of my good friend Jerry Dyer, having been a police officer here in the city of Tampa for 31 years and being the chief for 6, and now being in this position of mayor for 6 years as well. And Tampa, too, as Mayor Gloria pointed out, is one of the safest cities our size in the United States. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens through a collaboration between law enforcement and the community, the residents, the businesses, the visitors. And that collaboration is built on a necessary foundation of trust. And what happens when that trust is eroded is that crime goes up, specifically violent crime, because those immigrant populations become the victims of robberies, and they're not comfortable reporting that. They're not comfortable reporting the fraud because they don't trust law enforcement. And that is the fundamental reason that local law enforcement should not be engaged in immigration enforcement. I'm sure that everyone up here has attended swearing-in ceremonies where individuals become American citizens. And I can tell you that those events are incredibly moving to see individuals who have worked so hard to become a part of this country and to realize the freedoms that we take for granted each and every day. And I can say that from my experience, the individuals that I talk to that work to become American citizens, that time frame is a decade or more on average. So instead of looking, first of all, creating a problem that needs to be solved is a mistake. If we are looking for individuals who are committing crime in our communities, and everyone can agree that we do not want criminals in our communities, in our neighborhoods. But if you go looking for immigrants as the cause of that crime, that is a fool's path. because immigrants are coming to this country by and large to realize the American dream. And everyone in this room has descended from immigrants, maybe a couple of exceptions, but the vast majority have. So instead of focusing our energy, collective energy, on immigration enforcement, let's focus that energy on fixing a system that is broken. And also, I will say, echo with my good friend Jerry Dyer, is that there needs to be communication. We can't have federal agencies in our community carrying out raids that we don't know anything about. And was that raid in the restaurant focused on making our country safer, or was it focused on sowing fear in that community? Those are the things that we as Americans need to pay attention to. And we also need to recall what the First Amendment is, and that it's our job to ensure that every American has a platform on which they can express their views, whether we agree with them or not. That's what makes this country the best in the world. And everyone should feel comfortable expressing their views as long as they do it in a safe fashion. And we've seen the safe protests and demonstrations across our nation. Law enforcement is trained that they have time and distance on their side and that they are focused on de-escalation of a situation. I can tell you from experience that flash bombs, flashbangs do not de-escalate situations. And that's yet another reason why local law enforcement should not be involved in these immigration raids. But we are Americans. This country is in a point where there's so much divisiveness. What I would say is that we need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember we live in the greatest country in the world, and that if we have a conversation with someone, our similarities will far outweigh our differences. And that's what we need to focus on as Americans.
Any questions? We'll ask Mayor to stick around for any one-on-ones to follow up. Thanks,
Good
everybody.
deal.